welcome to the deep dive. Today we're not really looking at the Netflix we all know, the streaming one.
Right.
Instead, we're going way back to when they were a mail-order DVD rental company. Can you even picture that? Getting DVDs in the mail?
It sounds almost ancient now, doesn't it?
It does. So our mission today is to unpack those early days, the key choices, the near misses, the clever strategies that really shaped Netflix early on.
And we're using insights from this great Thai language podcast series by Nop Phongsathorn. It's a really deep business case study approach.
Yeah, he really digs into their strategy.
Exactly. And we've pulled out the core lessons and some facts that honestly surprised me. It's not just history.
No, definitely not.
It's about seeing how a business deals with huge challenges and finds like really innovative ways to grow.
Absolutely. And forget that smooth success story you sometimes hear.
Oh, yeah?
According to our source, Netflix almost went under. Like 5 separate times.
5 times. It's incredible they survived.
Right. So we're going to look at how they faced those moments, the smart fixes they came up with, and the sort of core business ideas behind their early success. Get ready for some moments, I think.
Definitely.
Okay, so first things first. Let's clear up that common origin story. You know the one Reed Hastings gets mad about a Blockbuster late fee?
For Apollo 13, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's the one. And boom, he invents streaming. But it's not quite how it happened, is it?
Not immediately, no. That late fee definitely planted a seed, like there has to be a better way than this. But streaming, the tech just wasn't there yet for everyone.
Right.
So Netflix actually started out mailing DVDs. That was chapter 1, and it was touch and go. The Thai podcast really stresses this.
Yeah.
It basically says, if you've heard these simple success stories, think again. Success wasn't easy. Netflix itself almost died 5 times.
Wow. That really puts it in perspective. So no servers initially, just envelopes.
Envelopes and stamps, pretty much. And before they could even compete, they had to really, really understand Blockbuster.
The big guy on the block.
The undisputed king. Nearly 10,000 stores in the U.S. alone. Think about that scale.
Huge.
And their whole model was buying tons of new releases for that initial rush. But that had its own problems.
Like needing all those stores.
Exactly. So Netflix looked at that and thought, okay, we can't build 10,000 stores. That's impossible.
Right.
But maybe we don't need to.
Yeah.
Their, genius move was using something that already went everywhere.
The mailman.
The U.S. Postal Service. The Thai podcast says they kept their store only at their office, but used the existing infrastructure, the Postal Service, to send these movies to everyone's homes.
That's brilliant, cutting out massive overhead.
Totally. Huge cost advantage, and they could reach anyone with a mailbox.
Okay, so they've got the delivery sorted. What about the website, their online store, basically? Was that super innovative from day one?
Actually, no. They were smart about it. They looked around at who was doing e-commerce well at the time. Amazon. The podcast is really clear. Our read, then, copied everything that Amazon did, changed it to become Netflix. Copied the design, copied the buttons, copied almost every function from Amazon.
Wow, just straight up copied it.
Pretty much. Why reinvent the wheel, right? They wanted it to be easy to use from the get-go, so they borrowed from the best, super savvy.
Okay, very practical. But mailing DVDs, they're kind of fragile, aren't they? Did that cause problems?
Oh, absolutely. That was one of the first big headaches. DVDs getting cracked or scratched in the mail. A lot of them.
Right. These aren't digital files. They're physical things getting thrown around.
Exactly. And this is where you see that early scrappiness. Reed Hastings didn't just, tell someone else to fix it.
He got involved himself.
Totally hands-on.
Yeah.
The podcast describes him making prototypes of boxes or several types of envelopes. Reed then tried putting DVDs or CDs into them, wrote down addresses, went to friends in various cities across America, and the friends would send them back to see which type was the most durable.
No way. The CEO is personally mailing DVDs back and forth.
Yep. Testing, packaging, durability himself. That's like commitment. It shows how determined they were to make this mail order thing work.
That's amazing. Okay, so they figured out the packaging, but then as they grew, they started seeing other patterns, right? In the data.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah.
Once they had more customers, they could start analyzing behavior. And they noticed something weird. Customer retention was different depending on where people lived.
Different how?
People on the East Coast were canceling their subscriptions way more often than people on the West Coast.
Okay. West Coast was their home base, right, near Silicon Valley.
Right, so the West Coast was closer to their main distribution center.
So shipping times. Could it be that simple?
That was the hypothesis. The podcast mentions they dug into the data. Reed Hastings went and opened up the data, sat down to analyze them. He found that actually there were many people who signed up, but retention was very low, especially on the East Coast.
So people were interested enough to sign up, but something was making them leave.
And their main theory, their second hypothesis, as the podcast calls it, the main reason, thinking it must be this reason, was the delivery time.
Makes sense. If it takes like a week turnaround to get your next movie on the East Coast versus maybe a couple of days on the West Coast?
Yeah, that's a big difference in experience, especially back then. It feels ancient now, but waiting a week felt long even then.
Okay, so the obvious fix seems like building more warehouses, right? Get closer to the East Coast customers, but that costs a ton of money.
A huge amount, especially for a startup. So they did something much smarter first.
What was that?
They came up with this thing the podcast calls the early next rental unlock. It was like a tweak to their system.
Early next rental unlock. Okay, how did that work?
Super simple, but really clever. The podcast explains it like this. Just by you sending it, waiting for the post office is fine. The post office being slow is fine. But we will change the status to allow you to order the next movie immediately.
So as soon as you dropped the return DVD in the mail.
Exactly. Once the Postal Service scanned it, basically, Netflix would let you pick your next movie right away. You didn't have to wait for it to physically arrive back at their warehouse.
Oh, that's brilliant. It cuts down the perceived waiting time for the customer, even if the actual shipping takes just as long.
Precisely. It made the service feel much faster, especially for people further away, without Netflix having to spend millions on new buildings immediately. That kind of thinking pops up again and again.
That's really smart. A low-cost fix with a big impact on user experience.
Totally. And it worked. It proved they understood the delivery time issue, and then, based on that success, they eventually did build out that huge network of distribution centers, something like 230 of them eventually.
Wow. Okay. So they solved packaging, they solved delivery times, but then things got tougher again, right? Big competitors started noticing them.
Oh, yeah. Once it was clear you could make money renting DVDs by mail, the big guys jumped in. Walmart, Best Buy. Suddenly, they weren't just the alternative to Blockbuster anymore.
They had competition everywhere.
Widespread competition from retailers with deep pockets and stores all over the place. That must have been terrifying.
Yeah, how does a relatively small mail order company fight that?
This was another huge turning point. They made a massive pivot. The monthly subscription. Unlimited rentals for one flat fee.
The model we know now, basically.
But they were the first to do it for DVDs by mail. The podcast points this out. Where Netflix started doing it for the first time, first in this industry to do it, renting movies on a monthly basis. The subscription model.
That was revolutionary back then for rentals. Paper rental was the norm.
Completely. And it changed their business. Predictable revenue, which helps a lot with planning and investment. It's a lesson many businesses use today.
Okay, the all-you-can-eat buffet for DVDs. Sounds great for customers, but did it cause new problems for Netflix?
It absolutely did.
Yeah.
Suddenly demand shot through the roof. Everyone wanted the hottest new releases, and with unlimited rentals.
They ran out of popular movies all the time.
Constantly. Stock shortages became a massive issue. You can't just buy infinite copies of every single movie.
Right, that's not sustainable. So how did they handle that? More cleverness.
More cleverness and more data. They leaned hard into their recommendation system. They were already collecting all this data on what people watched.
So they started using it to suggest other movies.
Exactly. They looked for patterns. Like, okay, people who watched movie A often also rented movie B. So if movie A is out of stock,
to just movie B instead.
Precisely. Help people discover stuff they might like, stuff they maybe hadn't heard of. The podcast explains, Netflix then used the same method of collecting data. If I watched movie A, Netflix had data showing that people who watched movie A would also rent movie B. It's like finding AI, machine learning, allowing them to guess that someone who liked movie A would also likely rent movie B next.
So using AI and machine learning even back then to personalize recommendations. But how did that directly fix the stock shortage?
Here's the really strategic part. They didn't just recommend any similar movie. They specifically tweaked the recommendations to push movies they had in stock.
Oh, that's sneaky. But smart.
Very smart. The podcast says, by recommending only movies or films that were still in stock, any movie or DVD that was currently running low on stock or was already out of stock would not be recommended.
So if the big new release was unavailable, the algorithm would subtly guide you towards something else you might like that was sitting on their shelves.
Exactly. It balanced demand with their actual inventory. using data not just for user experience, but for core operations. Brilliant.
Okay, that's incredibly clever. Meanwhile, what's Blockbuster doing while Netflix is pulling off these moves? They're seeing this subscription thing take off.
And this is where it gets painful. From Blockbuster's perspective, it's like a textbook example of disruptive innovation. They saw the subscription model.
But they didn't take it seriously.
They dismissed it. They thought their model, relying heavily on those late fees everyone hated, was actually more profitable per rental. The podcast notes existing players when they see small players trying to do new businesses. It's not that the big players don't see it. They do see it, but they don't think of doing anything about it.
Because the new thing looks less profitable initially. The innovator's dilemma.
Exactly. Sticking with what works, even when the ground is shifting underneath you. Their huge store network, once a strength, became a weakness.
And didn't Blockbuster have a chance to just buy Netflix early on?
Yes, that's the infamous story. They apparently turned down the chance to buy Netflix for just $50 million.
$50 million. Ouch. Knowing what we know now, that's just, wow.
Hindsight is 20/20, but yeah. And their public statements weren't much better.
What did they say?
The podcast quotes a Blockbuster spokesperson basically saying, Blockbuster would never do online business. That business is not sustainable.
Oh, man. Talk about famous last words.
Seriously.
But even as Netflix was winning the DVD war, they weren't standing still, were they? They were already thinking about the next thing.
Absolutely. Internet speeds were getting better. Broadband was becoming more common. They started looking seriously at streaming.
Recognizing that mailing discs, even with 230 warehouses, had its limits long term.
Exactly. It wasn't a sudden jump. It was like the next logical step they were preparing for. But switching to streaming wasn't instantly smooth sailing either, right?
No, new model, new problems.
What kind of issues did they hit early on with streaming?
Well, one big one was churn again. People signing up for streaming, maybe for a free trial.
And then canceling pretty quickly.
Yeah, they weren't sticking around, even with all that content theoretically available on demand.
So just having a huge library wasn't the magic bullet.
Apparently not. Netflix realized the key wasn't just having the content, it was helping people find something they actually wanted to watch. It came back to user experience, UX, content discovery.
Making it easy to navigate all those choices.
Because what they saw happening, according to the podcast, was people logging in, scrolling, and scrolling,
Yeah, it's
scrolling.
Analysis paralysis, I've been there.
Right. The podcast says he tried looking at the data, found that many people scrolled up and down, left and right. In the end, I don't know what to watch and just turn off the TV because I really don't know what to watch. People were getting overwhelmed and just giving up.
Okay, so the endless library was actually kind of a problem. How did they tackle that?
They figured out that people rely heavily on the visuals, the posters for the movies and shows.
The thumbnail images we see now.
Exactly. And that led to another really innovative idea, multiple posters for the same title.
Wait, different posters for one movie. Why?
Personalization. The podcast says, finally, Netflix came to understand, oh, people who come to Netflix choose movies. Series based on the posters.
Okay, so the poster is key.
Right. So they started showing different users, different posters for the same movie based on their viewing history.
So if I watch a lot of action movies, I might see the action-packed poster for a film.
But if someone else watches mostly romantic comedies, they might see a poster for the same film emphasizing the romance or the lead actors.
That's fascinating. Is it like visually tailoring the recommendation?
Exactly. A subtle nudge towards something you're more likely to click on based on the visuals you respond to. Super smart way to cut through the clutter.
Really clever UX design.
Yeah.
But they did other things too, right? To build that early streaming audience, especially people maybe still hesitant about streaming.
Yeah, they got into original content, but in a very specific way at first. Sequels.
Sequels to existing popular movies.
Exactly. The podcast mentions this.
Right.
Netflix then found these things. Oh, they have a lot of money already, right? So they invested in creating movies. Let's make a sequel for this movie and make it exclusive to Netflix.
So taking a known movie with a built-in audience and creating the next chapter, but only on Netflix.
Right. A way to pull in fans of the original, even if they weren't totally sold on streaming yet, giving them content they literally couldn't get anywhere else.
That's a powerful hook. Build loyalty, reduce churn, get people talking.
Exactly. All these steps, from mailing DVDs to tweaking poster art, it just shows this pattern, doesn't it?
It really does. It's this constant focus on the customer, using data to understand them, being willing to completely change strategy, experiment, learn.
Yeah.
Even when things looked really bad or they were up against giants.
So yeah, wrapping it up, that early Netflix story, it's
Mm-hmm.
not simple. It's messy, near-death experiences, figuring out packaging, delivery times, inventing the subscription model, battling Walmart, then tackling streaming
It
discovery.
was a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah,
And that data-driven, user-focused approach was key the whole way through.
absolutely. And it all started with DVDs in the mail using the postal service. It kind of makes you wonder,
Hmm.
considering how they leverage that existing, maybe overlooked thing like the postal service, what seemingly old school infrastructures or maybe forgotten technologies might hold unexpected potential for innovation today. Something to think about.
That's a great question to end on. Definitely food for thought.